Hello, my dear friends. It's hard to believe that in another 3 weeks will be Rosh Hashanah. Indeed, time marches on relentlessly, and it's like, ready or not, here we come. It's going to be Rosh Hashanah. This past year has been the most unusual year of my life. It's probably the same is true for most of you as well. First, we had the pandemic that we were quarantined for months, and then even after we emerged, everybody's walking around wearing masks and practicing social distancing. It's so strange to look at in the shul or in the supermarket or wherever you go. You see people with masks over their faces, and it's also been a year of tremendous unrest in the United States, social upheaval, and finally, it's a year of a political of an election for the president of the United States, and this tremendous conflict going on between the two parties. I spent a lot of time, but more time than I should have, watching pieces of the Democratic and the Republican convention. It's very fascinating to watch, but it's also you could appreciate the enormous power of the position of the United States government and the president of the United States, and there's so much anger and animosity and hostility between the two sides, and each side claims that this is the most important election of the century, which indeed it may be. So there's all these things going on at the same time in the United States of America. So when we experience the Yom Noraim, it's essential that we should take away lessons from the events of the past few months. So how will the coronavirus and the social unrest, how will that impact on the experience of Yom Noraim this coming year? It's a question I ask myself, and it's a question that we all should be asking ourselves. How is this Rosh Hashanah going to be affected by the experiences of the past year? This week's Parsha, we always look to the Parsha for inspiration. This week's Parsha, and I want to use that as a springboard to answer this question. The beginning of the Parsha deals with Yifas Torah. Yifas Torah means a woman who is very beautiful, and the Torah says that if a man goes to war and they're victorious, and the Jewish army is victorious, and they take people captives, and among them is this woman who's very beautiful, Yifas Torah, and the soldier falls in love with her, the Chashaktaba, he wants to marry her, he has a desire for her. So the Torah says, you know what, it's okay. You can marry this non-Jewish woman. And Rashi says, because the Torah understood human nature, if you don't allow him to marry her in a way that's halachically permissible, he'll have a relationship with her anyway. So it's better to do it in the framework of halacha. Nonetheless, there's an effort to dissuade him. And the Torah describes how the soldier brings the woman to his house, and she has to cut her nails and her long hair and change from her beautiful clothing to plain clothing. So her beauty, which is superficial and external, it should be diminished. And when the soldier comes home, he should see that she spends a month crying for her loss of her family, which shows that she's still connected to an alien culture, and such a marriage is not likely to succeed. So the purpose of that is to try to dissuade the soldier from marrying this woman. Now, the beginning of the parsha, the opening phrase is "Kiseitzi milchama alavecha." When you go to war against your enemy, "Unusanu Hashem Elokecha biyadecha," and God delivers the enemy in your hands, and v'shavisa shivyo, and you will take captives during the end of the battle, as a result of the battle. So the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, who was one of the greatest commentaries on Chumash, he was Rav Chaim ben Attar. He passed away in 1743 at the young age of 46 years old, which is amazing because his commentary on Chumash is absolutely breathtaking. And he was a very holy person. He's known as the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. You don't say the Or HaChaim, is the name of his sefer. You have to say the Or HaChaim, out of respect, Or HaChaim HaKadosh. He was the holy Or HaChaim. So he asks the following question: why does the Torah have to tell us all this information? You're going to war, and you're going to war, it's against your enemy. And God delivers the enemy into your hands. What do we need all that for? It should just say that if you have a woman who's a captive and you want to marry her because she's a fast Torah, so this is what has to be done. What's the purpose of this entire introduction? So Orach Chaim HaKadosh has a beautiful explanation, but I want to offer my own thought, and that is that who is it that goes to battle in the Jewish army? It's only the tzaddikim. The Gemara says that if anybody has performed any averos, then he's exempt from going to war, because the Torah says that if a person is afraid, he shouldn't go to war if he's frightened. So we're talking about an army of tremendous tzaddikim. They're all tzaddikim in the army, all the soldiers. So how's it possible that a person who's a tzaddik, he goes to war, and what happens to him? Now he comes back and he wants to marry a non-Jewish woman just because she's pretty or beautiful? So I think the answer is because when a person goes to war and they're victorious over the enemy, obviously it involved an enormous effort on the part of the soldiers and the army, and there's military strategy, and there's physical strength, and there's devotion and dedication. So at the end of the war, the soldiers are entitled to the spoils of war, and there's a sense of entitlement because look, we fought so hard, so we're entitled to the spoils. One of the spoils is people that they captured the women and they brought them back to Eretz Yisrael. So a soldier, even though he went to war as a great tzaddik, but it's natural that he should feel a sense of entitlement, that he should be allowed to marry this woman because it was through his efforts, together with the rest of the army, that the war was victorious. So in order to dissuade that type of thinking, so the Torah introduces the whole parsha of the Yifas Torah by saying, when you go to war, God will deliver the enemy in your hands, which is to say, we are not in control. Don't think that you won the war because you're such a brilliant soldier or you had such a terrific strategy. You won the war because Unisano Hashem Elkecha B'Yedecha. God delivered the enemy into your hands. And this is an enormously important lesson throughout our lives, because we do all sorts of things and we achieve things, and it's by dint and virtue of our talents and our effort and our devotion and dedication. But it's always important to remember that God delivers the enemy into your hands. It's not through my own ability, it's because God delivers the enemy in your hands, and we are not in charge. And that is an enormously important lesson that we take away from the events of the past few months, from the pandemic, the coronavirus. There was nothing that doctors could do for the first few months. Even now, they're very limited. The medical science did not have cures for the virus. Maybe now there's some cures or some medicine at least, but it's still it's more or less a disease that is that we're at the mercy of the disease. It's a small virus, but modern science with all the innovative discoveries and the medicines, but there is nothing that prevents the virus from attacking us. President Trump announced over and over again that he hopes that by the end of the year there will be a vaccine, and there's been a tremendous effort. He directed billions of dollars towards research, and he engaged various drug companies. But in the end, it's important even when there will be a vaccine, it's important to remember it's in the Sana Hashem Elkecha B'Yedecha. Don't think that the vaccine is going to be successful because of your efforts. It will be successful, and your efforts are important too. If we don't try, God doesn't help us. The person has to have hishtadlus. But in the end, it's always when the Sana Hashem Elkecha B'Yedecha. God delivers in your hand. And Yom Noraim is all predicated on the assumption that what happens to me in the coming year is not because of how smart I am or how talented or how hard I work. It's going to be dependent on what God decides on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah Yikasevu, Yom Som Kippur Yechasem, and God inscribes in His book, and he seals it on Yom Kippur. Mi Yichya Mi Yamus, who's going to live and who's not going to live. And in the Sanatoka, we talk about Miba Magefa, and we never pay any attention to that. Miba Magefa, who's going to die in an epidemic? Who thought that anybody would be dying in an epidemic? But this past year, it was Miba Magefa. Who were the people that died in a Magefa? And we're not secure yet. The pandemic is still ravaging in many places in the country and around the world. So Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur highlights our dependency on the Rebbeinu Shalom, that we are not in charge. And it's not only our health, but it's also our parnasa and our relationships and how successful we are in life in general. It's all in the hands of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Because no matter how hard we work, it's unisano Hashem Elokecha biyadecha. It's very easy to lose sight of that. Just as this soldier who goes to war, the Torah says unisano Hashem Elokecha, that he should realize that it's not because of his great skill as a soldier that they won the battle. But the fact is that even though that's the case, but the soldier decided he wants to marry this woman, it's because that message did not was not absorbed by the person. It was not integrated. He did not feel that it was God that won the war, because it's normal for human beings that when you work hard at something and you're devoted, that you think, I'm the one that did it. The Torah describes this as it's my strength that accomplished this entire feat. I remember when I was 17 years old. So the 6-Day War broke out in Israel. Probably many of you that are listening were not even born at the time of the 6-Day War, but I remember very clearly. This goes back 53 years ago. It was a time before the war took place. It was a time of enormous trepidation. Israel was a fledgling country. It didn't have the tools, the arms, the technologically advanced tools that they have today. And Israel was surrounded literally by millions and millions of hostile Arabs that wanted nothing more than to drive the entire Israeli population into the sea. And Nasser then was the prime minister of Egypt, and he was leading the charge. And all around, surrounding Israel, all these Arab countries, and it was very frightening. And the winds of war were brewing, and it was apparent that there was going to be a war. It was extremely scary, and we were saying Tillim every single day. All of a sudden, one day we woke up in the morning and we discovered the war had broken out. But within the first hour, I believe, of the war, Israel launched a preemptive strike, and they destroyed the air force of all the Arab countries that are surrounding Israel and that were involved in the conflict. They were all wiped out in the first hour of the war. And because of that, the Israelis had air supremacy, and they were able to win the war in 6 days. And there was a tremendous sense of euphoria that, look how powerful the Israeli army is. I mean, it was incredible that they should be able to knock out the air forces. It was genius that they were able to have that strategy and to effectively accomplish that. And who ever heard of a war that gets won in 6 days? And it was a result of the Israeli ingenuity and their brilliance and their talent and their devotion that they were able to win the war in that fashion. And we all felt a tremendous sense of pride about the Israeli army, that they were so powerful and so strong, and they accomplished such an amazing feat. And that's how human beings are. We don't be. How do such miracles take place? It didn't just happen because the Israelis were such great soldiers. It was Unusana Hashem Elokecha b'yadecha. God delivered those Arab countries in the hands of the Israeli army. But that's human nature, that it's easy to see our own involvement and to think, I'm the one that did it, I'm the one that accomplished it. So there's going to be a vaccine in Mitzvah Hashem as soon as possible, and the president is not going to announce that it's Unusana Hashem Elokecha b'yadecha, that the Rebbeinu Shalom is the one that delivered the vaccine. We're going to, we know all the effort and all the research and all the resources, and even though maybe there will be some token recognition that thank God that we're able to do this, but the primary view is going to be that it's because of our own efforts that this took place. And it's so easy for a person not to have this proper sense of perspective. And the events of the past few months and all the turmoil and the illness and everything else that's been going on underscores the fact that it's Unisano Hashem Elokecha B'Yedecha. We're not in charge. We don't have any control. The Rebbeinu Shem is the one that delivers the enemy to our hands. And our davening on Yom Noraim is effective to the extent that we realize how much we're then dependent on the Kadosh Baruch Hu. The pasuk that I quoted says, "Unisana Hashem Elokecha B'Yedecha." God delivers the enemy in your hands. Why does you have to say in your hands? You just say that God destroyed the enemy or eradicated the enemy. Why in your hands? So I think the point is there's a partnership. Even though man without God is totally impotent, but the reason why the Rebbeinu Shalom is, so to speak, empowered to help the army win the war is because of the impact of the tefillos and the devotion and dedication of the people that are fighting in the army. So therefore the Torah says, Biyadecha. It's delivered in your hands to accentuate that it's our hands are important as well, because we're working in partnership with the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's true, without the Rebbeinu Shalom, without Siyat D'Shmaya, there's nothing we could do. It's out of our hands. But when we conduct ourselves properly, and we perform mitzvahs, and we daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so then it's Unisana Hashem Elokecha B'Yedecha. God delivers the enemy in your hands. So as we approach the Yom Noraim, this is an enormously important lesson, because to the extent that we recognize our dependency on the Rebbeinu Shalom, to that extent the Rebbeinu Shalom will listen to our tefillos. And it's the dependency on Hashem on the one hand, but also the power that we have through our tefillos, through sincere tefillah, to change the destiny and the course of history that's unfolding before our eyes, both in terms of pandemic and the social unrest and the political dimensions. Everything is going to be Unisano Hashem Elokecha B'Yedecha. Let us hope in Mitzvah Hashem that we have this appreciation and this realization that we are not in charge. We don't control anything. We are impotent. It's all in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in that way, we'll be Zocha Mitzvah Hashem to Uksiva B'Chasima Tova, to a wonderful and beautiful, healthy and prosperous new year.